stronger, faster.
Hi, I'm AJ Pickett, and I'm gonna ask a few questions. All right, Wally, do you prefer pre-made adventures or homebrewing your own adventure?
I'm going to answer this in a little bit more of a serious tone, but I'm going to answer this as whatever the DM is able to run the best, or maybe even put the most prep time in, because I think whether it's a homebrew adventure or a module or published adventure, what have you, if you take someone that doesn't play a lot and doesn't get on the internet to see what all of these different adventure books are, if as a DM you run it good enough, they're not going to know whether or not that's published or if that's homebrew. In fact, I've experienced a few times where I've even intermixed a few, and I've had players ask after, is that really in that book? I'm like, no, I kind of just added that part. So I think as long as the DM is prepared for it, for the adventure, and they run a good game, that it's not going to matter. And as far as I'm concerned go, I do like running both. So I like to mix mash them together. I like to add homebrew to my published, and I like to add published to my homebrew.
Alrighty, so I'm actually curious about this. If you were to say on a, on 100% here, do you run more homebrew or more pre-made adventures? Is it like 60-40, 50-50?
For me, it depends on what I'm going to run. Right now, it's a 50-50 shot. So for my campaigns that I run, I usually run a published adventure, but I do add probably about 25% homebrew. But when I run a one-shot adventure, it's all going to be homebrew. And that's the formula I have so far. I haven't been blessed enough to run a lot of games, but continuing on, it's probably going to remain about the same ratio.
All right. What about you, Ryan?
Well, the idea of better, I do think is so clickbaity, which is a great thing to put at the title of a video, right? I gotta echo exactly what Wally said. It's whatever the GM is better at doing. I've met GMs that run modules, and they run modules so amazingly well. It's like that's their world. They're really good at it, and they are not a creative person. Like, they can't come up with OC. They couldn't do a homebrew thing. And so if you've got someone that's really good at understanding, well, this is the story that I was given, this is how I can flesh it out, live in these characters, they understand the story structure and all of that. If they're good at that, man, run the module, run the book. That's fantastic. I would rather somebody run Strahd really well than sit through 2 weeks, two games of somebody's really bad fanfic service to episode 4 of an episode of Magicians or whatever that is, right? So yeah, it's what are you stronger at? And it's fine to dip your toes into the other one and try running some homebrew if all you've ever done is modules, because that's your safety net. It's fine to go and grab some modules if you've only ever run your homebrew stuff and be like, okay, what can I do if I'm a little bit more constrained? And then ultimately, I think if you start doing both, you might find yourself doing what Wally was saying, was where you're picking and choosing some things from a book to put into your world and throwing some of your stuff from your worlds into the books that are out there.
Alrighty.
So
would you say that you run more homebrew than
what I run? Is almost entirely homebrew. Okay. And that's not because I'm not for the books. I own some of the modules that I really like, and some of the existing lore that's out there I'll use. But the storylines and what the story structure is and what we're trying to accomplish, I mostly run homebrew. And that's true around my table. That's true of kind of whatever system I'm running. And I do 100% homebrew if I'm running at a convention.
Alrighty. And what about you, Fred? How are you on the module or homebrew side of adventures?
Thank you for asking me that question, AJ. It's a very important question. I feel like I've answered this question before, many times before in these roundtables. I have to say that really, I think it's whatever people prefer. If you prefer pre-made, pre-made. If you prefer homebrew, homebrew. I think a lot of people use both. But if you're asking me personally what I prefer, I don't really care that much. I'm always been about, do I have time? And I've found as a general result of experience that when I homebrew an entire adventure myself, it takes me a long time. I don't have time anymore. And I have usually two responses to my homebrew adventures. So I have two responses to them, to my adventures when I homebrew them. They either think they are appallingly cliche and boring, or they are so stupidly outrageous and crazy that they love it. So because I get the extremes of two ends, that I always find that like it's like a Russian roulette for me for homebrew. So right now, because of time and just because I don't want to have that Russian roulette effect on my table, I tend to combine very simple pre-made adventures, like literally things I can prepare in 5 or 10 minutes, which I know somebody's going to say that can't be done. Well, yes, it can be done, but you can't do it through Wizards of the Coast because they've got no idea. But if you use something like Kobold Press, they're prepared 2, the layers books that they've got, they're like a page, 2, 3 or 4 pages. You can put that all together. It's just a basic structure. There's not much there, so you can add a lot to it, which I tend to do. So I just change things. I have a very much a sort of here's my structure. I'm going to change some monsters in here. I'm going to make them a bit tougher. Actually, I'm going to make them a lot tougher. I'm probably going to throw in a few other things as well on top of all of that. I want to feed them an adventure in a different way rather than what is structured in the book. And I'm going to build everything like Lego bricks, build one adventure over the top of the next one. And like, I don't know necessarily what the next one's going to be because I need to know what they do in the current adventure. Once I've got that, then I'm like, okay, what is going to sort of fit? What is going to work? Right now, I am trying to work them towards a volcano, and I have decided that this is probably the time to do that. And I found an adventure very short that I will transpose into there, change some of the monsters, and change sort of the premise behind why that adventure was even included. It's part of the story that they're sort of following. So yes, mishmash, Lego bricks. That's how I do it.
Alrighty. I am going to break the mold from all of y'all, and I'm going to say pre-made modules are better. Here's why. It's not because the adventure itself is better. In fact, a lot of the time it probably is worse because your party has specific needs and desires, and your players ruin everything because that's what players do. The reason why I'm going to say pre-made modules are better is because of the communities behind them. Because if I make my own module, my own adventure, you know what no one wants to hear? No one wants to hear about your game. Nobody wants to hear about, oh, hey, what do I do in this scenario? And by the way, the players did this, and then there's this. No one wants to hear that. But if a bunch of people are running pre-made modules, then you can draw upon all those other people's experiences. We have all these Discords, all these Reddits, these Facebook groups, whatever else, and they all are covering the same things. So if you have any sort of issue or problem or looking to spice things up, you can draw upon those communities. So it's the communities that truly make the pre-made modules better, in my opinion.
That's a really good point, though. There's like a lot of YouTube channels that will cover like all of the pre-made adventure modules that you could go and watch, get like a difference of opinion and stuff like that. Yeah, that few of you here, but it's so weird for me though, because pre-made modules always seems like studying for a test for me. Like if I run Curse of Strahd and if I don't do it right, I feel like my players are going to notice that. Whereas if I'm doing a homebrew, I can have a few drinks and improv the entire session and they're not going to know, anything's different.
Well, and I think that's a weird part of the modules that comes down to the social contract, right? The trust between players and GMs of just like, the idea of having a player that's like, I'm sorry, but this isn't the order that this module is supposed to go in. Like, I don't want that type of player at my table, to be honest with you. And I don't mean to sound that's not as a gatekeeping type thing by any means. Like, someone that's going to tell you you're running a game wrong because you're improvising or you're changing things, like that's really weird. You know, if you know the story that well, you can run it. Or like, I don't know, that's weird to me, that having to worry about running the game wrong. Maybe that's a reason why I don't like them. I don't like running them as much, but I don't know. That might just be me.
Well, once again, that's players ruining everything, right?
Fun allowed.
You know, it's one of those things where I say this all the time. Don't run anybody else's game. Run your game. DMs never are never wrong, right? When you're running that module and you change something up, it's not because, you messed up. It's because you wanted to change it up, or you purposely let something slide, or you had that one player who's already played it and knows it, so you purposely changed things up for the better or for the worse. But hey, you changed it, and that's the end of story. And I think that's what's truly the awesome part about running these pre-made modules is you take this piece of paper and you take whatever you want out from it, but then more importantly, you slap in whatever you deem fit.
I think if I was a player and I knew a module and then something unexpected happened, I would take that as a moment to like be surprised and be having fun. I would like to think that's what I would do.
I think I would too.
All right.
I have no idea if my players are having fun. I've discovered over time that when I think I've run a really good session, it's not necessarily means that they've run a really good session. And when I thought I did a really bad job, like really bad, and my players will come up to me and say, "Oh man, we had so much fun." And I'm like, "Mate, I had no time to prep today. I just made it all up on the fly." But that doesn't always happen. So yeah, I have no idea.
What that's telling me is you need to be miserable so that way your players have a better time, is what it sounds like. Alrighty, that is us on pre-made modules or homebrew adventures. Go ahead and tell us what you think about. Do you guys prefer homebrew or do you prefer pre-made modules? Or, as I suspect, a lot of people are going to be right there in the middle. Go ahead and tell us all those things because I would love to hear it down in the comments below.
That was a good conversation.
Yeah,
it was.
All
right,
I'm glad I thought of that question.
Yeah. I'm glad.
I would love
AJ Pickett.
Run. Oh god, I would love to run and be in a game of Strahd, and if I ever do it, like I've never run it, because I want to play I want to run a Strahd that is terrifying, that is grim dark, and it always turns into a vampire in Brooklyn. It always turns into the biggest joke. Yeah. And I want to run that game or be in that game where it's legitimately scary.